What's up, everybody? Sunday morning here on the Fantasy Firebox. Tony Jigsaw Cutillo here, Win Daily Sports. Listen, man, it is a beautiful day here in the East Coast. The weather is gorgeous, but no better day to talk about fantasy football. Now, yesterday is a baseball day, right? We talk about that all the time on the Firebox. We talk about, baseball on Saturdays, football on Sundays, because now it is the fantasy football takeover, right? This is takeover time, and this is one of my most exciting times of the year. I've been into basketball, I've been into baseball, don't really mix up into golf, but I'll tell you what, basketball and baseball are fun, but there's nothing like the NFL, right? There's nothing like the NFL. As always, Tom, what's up, buddy? How you doing? Passing that Fanatics, my man, checking in. What's up, brother? What's good? It's a Sunday. We're talking football. I know we're all ready. I know us in Philadelphia are ready for the Eagles, right? But we got a lot of fancy stuff to talk about. And I will tell you, for everybody tuning in, make sure tonight, Sirius XM Satellite Radio, I will be co-hosting for a live 2 hours with a call-in number. Call in. It's channel 87 on Sirius XM. Call us in. We're going to be talking all things from ADPs to sleepers to Rajers to fallers, you name it. But we got a ton of stuff to talk about today. We're going to go about 30 to 40 minutes of live fantasy football talk. And the first thing we do is we started breaking down off-season teams about 3-4 weeks ago, maybe even longer than that, maybe a month and a half ago. We broke down teams like the Rams and the Cleveland Browns, the Baltimore Ravens. And today we're going to dive deep into Pittsburgh Steelers. And again, the reason why we're going to dive into the Pittsburgh Steelers is because there's a ton of question marks surrounding that team. They've been a very, very good fantasy team over the last several years, but last year, not so much. We've seen the rise of guys like Chase Claypool, obviously, but the running game has not been what it was. Ben Roethlisberger, as always, the injury from the elbow was a lot more severe than people may have thought. So a lot of different things happened last year when it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers, okay? A lot of different things. And that's one of the main reasons why we have to break down this team, because there are a ton of question marks. And we start right off with Big Ben, right? We start right off with Big Ben, and we talk about, what has Big Ben symbolized at 39 years old to the Pittsburgh Steelers? He has been able to rise the value of so many elite talents that have come through that gate in Pittsburgh, right? Just because of the 40 to 50 attempts that he would throw a game, right? His mobility factor, the idea of him not going down. I mean, the division of the Santonio Holmes catch in the Super Bowl will go down in infamy. Obviously, it's historic, but I can remember it like it was yesterday, right? So he's always had good running backs as well. For the most part, really good running game, obviously with Le'Veon Bell. But when the whole Lev Bell experiment kind of blew up, that's when things started to fall off the tracks for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And then that's when everybody started to ask, okay, what's going on here? What do we have here in the Pittsburgh Steelers? And one of the biggest things I would say is, when you're 39 years old, we've seen Tom Brady actually elevate himself to another form of greatness, which I never even thought was possible. But there's only certain guys that can do that, right? There's only certain guys that can do that. So you look at Ben Roethlisberger, and this is a different kind of 39-year-old quarterback. This dude has been through everything, right? He's been through everything. He's battled. He's brittled, right? He did come to training camp looking pretty chiseled, looking pretty good, looking like he's got a different motivation. But we know this is his last year. We already know that, right? How is he going to go out, right? How is this team going to rally around Big Ben? And number one, the offensive line is something that's got to be much better, right? One of the reasons why they weren't able to run the ball over the last 2 years is that offensive line was atrocious. One of the reasons why Big Ben couldn't do a lot of things he wanted to do, because he didn't have time to throw the ball, right? So this is one of the things that we have to look at from a fantasy perspective and say, okay, where do we go with this Pittsburgh Steelers team? Is this line going to be better, right? This is what we have to look at. Is this line going to be better? And honestly, for me personally, I don't think anybody thinks that they've done anything enough to make this team that much better from an offensive line standpoint. So that is the biggest question. when you go into your drafts, because you need to look at that. That's something you really need to look at, because if Big Ben does not have time to throw the ball, there's going to be problems. What's up, Al? Al checking in. Heat Ratio Sports, Half Court Heat, as always. We will be back real soon with some basketball content, and from a fantasy perspective as well. But today we're just all NFL, and we're talking about right now the offseason outlook for the Pittsburgh Steelers and what that means for fantasy owners. Right? What's that mean? How much trust do you put in Big Ben? And then you turn. We're talking about the offensive line not improving. So what does that mean for the running game? Right? And we're going to break down Naje Harris. We're going to break down what it means for Juju Smith-Schuster, Chase Claypool, Deontay Johnson. Right? We have to break this down. But just looking at Ben Roethlisberger, he did not look good last year. I don't know, in my opinion, how you can make him a QP1. Right? I don't see it. I know he's 39, right? And you look at Brady, who's 44, is doing some ridiculous things. But listen, the offense failed to reach 20 points in a 3-game stretch in December. Ben turned the ball over 4 times in the first half in the wild card loss against the Browns. Looked horrible. Lost 4 of the last final games. They started that was one of here's what's funny. It was one of the most fraudulent 11-0 starts for anything, right? For any team I've ever seen, okay? But his yards per completion was 9.5. 9.5. And if you look at that, that's really low. And what that did was that swung over to hurt guys like Juju Smith-Schuster, who finished with a career low of 8.6 yards per play. So you have to start to think, was it Juju? Was it Ben? And again, was it the offensive line? So listen, there's a lot of things going on with this team. They've always been known for their unbelievable defense. We all know that. But their defense wasn't that great. Right? The defense wasn't that great. The defense seems to be fading down. They had a lot of injuries last year, right? So that does come into perspective. But I think you really need to dive into this a little deeper than people are. Just think, oh, that's Big Ben. He'll be okay. Because I just don't think that is going to happen. Adam checking in. What's up, Adam? Had a good day in baseball yesterday, Adam. My man Castellanos was on fire. Told everybody that value, 4,200. Got to go grab him. I love it, man. I love it. So hopefully you guys did good as well. We did a lot of good things yesterday when it comes to MLB DFS. But let's go back to the Pittsburgh Steelers and let's talk about Naje Harris. So I think we've already established that the questions are out for Big Ben. We don't think he's a quarterback one, but let's look at Naje Harris and let's look at, what he has become for the Pittsburgh Steelers as a projection model. Okay. Now, obviously he comes from an unbelievable program. Okay. In Alabama. So we all know there's certain teams that you want to draft players from. Certain teams you already know they're running an NFL-style offense. Certain teams where you can feel comfortable drafting these guys in fantasy, and their game is going to translate to the NFL level. We already know that. Naje Harris is one of those guys. Okay? He is one of those guys. He dominated in his last 2 seasons. Okay? 51 total touchdowns for the Crimson Tide. 51. Now, again, I guarantee you his offensive line in Alabama was probably 10 times better than the one he's going to have in Pittsburgh. But it's all going to depend on how they utilize this young kid, right? And that's what it's going to depend on. All right, so they have poor blocking on this line, the lack of size, lack of strength, you name it. A lot of these guys were like human turnstiles. But if they can get this together, Naje Harris can be very, very productive. Okay, they were last in the NFL last year at 3.6 yards per carry. That's very low. When I'm ranking running backs from a fantasy perspective, I'm looking at least 4.1, 4.2 and higher. 4.1, 4.2 to me is like my Mendoza line. I want 4.5 to 5, right? So when you're talking about 3.6, that just shows you how bad of a year from the running back position they had, whether it be Benny Snell, whether it be James Conner. It doesn't matter. Whoever was in there was not good enough. They let James Conner walk a free agency, obviously, okay, which is why they drafted Naje Harris. But that's why I think that they're going to lean on Naje a lot more than people suspect. I do. I think this is going to become more of a run first off offense instead of a pass first off offense. I do. I think that knowing the age of Ben Roethlisberger, knowing how the offensive system did not work over the last 2 years, and probably still the deficiency on the offensive line, we need to start. That's why a lot of those numbers were low last year. That's why Juju was 8.6 and Ben was 9.5. I think that's because the short passes ran apparent, and they ran through this Pittsburgh offense because they just couldn't run the ball. And they also didn't have the line to protect Big Ben. So they had to get rid of that ball quick. You know, this is a team that lived and died by the long game, right? And they did those long, hard developing routes from the receiver perspective. And they weren't allowed to have them formulate because of the deficiency along the offensive line. So that's one of the biggest things I think we really need to look at. Now, there's some sites I see out there for Naje Harris talking about 300 to 325 plus touches. That's a lot. That's a lot. You know, can that be? I don't know. I don't know if that can happen. Adam, Big Ben's on his way out of his game. It's not what exactly. And that's the thing, Adam. You know, we don't know what Big Ben has left to prove, right? We don't know what he has left in the tank. It was a pretty severe elbow injury. Very severe elbow injury. So again, you have to be very, very careful, you know, when we look at this and say, how does this resonate with the fantasy football outlook? And again, getting back to Naje Harris, I mean, you're talking about 300 to 325 plus touches is a whole lot for a rookie. Now, can that be possible in this style of offense? I do. I think so. I think it could. But again, I mean, when you're talking about fantasy, you're talking about Naje Harris, he's trying to push himself into the top 10 conversation. And because of the lack of running backs, in my opinion, at the top, 6 or 7 of lockdown RB1s, I think there's a lot of question marks. And I think that you need to start looking at guys that are not going to be 1 and 2 punches. Like, Naje Harris, there's no stretch for me to say I would probably draft Naje Harris above J.K. Dobbins, right? And a lot of people may not say that that's a right move, but J.K. Dobbins has the Gus Edwards effect. I've said that before. I'll say it again. 140 touches for the average of the last 3 years. That's not going to change. Naje Harris has no competition for carries. Okay, Benny Snell is a nice guy, but he's going to be a change of pace kind of guy. That's really it. Right? That's really it. I mean, all he's going to be is a placeholder, an insurance policy. So Naje Harris is going to be that guy. Now when you look at the wide receiver position, Juju Smith-Schuster, one of the worst years of his career when we're talking about 8.6 yards per catch, which is absolutely terrible. Again, very, very strange year for Juju. He was drafted to be that number 1 guy. It was all, can he be the guy without Antonio Brown? Right? That was the question mark on Juju. Can he be that guy? And unfortunately, he was not that guy. Right? He gave you something. He gave you the touchdowns. Right? He got to a point where he was looking like he was a touchdown machine. He got up to 97 catches. Okay, but again, man, I don't know. Like, not those 97 catches are very deceiving. Very deceiving. Okay, that 8.6 yards per catch is super, super low. That's backup tight end territory. Okay, I know you do have the rise of Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, but when you're supposed to be the guy, the number 1 guy, the number 1 target, you're not supposed to have 8.6 yards per catch. I mean, it's different if you drop from 17 to 12 or 17 to 13, but when you're dropping from 18.2 to 8.6, that's terrible. So you really have to look at what he's going to do. Now, he is on a 1-year deal, okay? So it's one of those prove-it deals, right? So, but Juju can only prove so much if Ben can get him the ball, right? I mean, that's what we have to look at. A lot of this is going to be, what do we do with Ben, okay? So last year, 656 pass attempts. They're not going to touch that as an offense, in my opinion. Okay, they're not going to touch 656. They may not even touch 600. This is going to be a run first team. I'm telling you right now, it's going to be a run first team, because if all the national prognosticators are correct, and they're going to say that Juju Smith and Naje Harris are going to get 320, 325 plus touches, there's no way in heck that 656 pass attempts is going to be something that you can look at when when you're trying to dissect this offensive projection. So I don't see it. I think Juju falls out of that wide receiver 3 kind of territory, and in that, honestly, he could wind up being a steal. Right? I mean, these are the kind of guys you look at when you drop down right now. I mean, listen, he ranked 23rd last year overall in wide receivers. And this year, his ADP number, if you're talking about wide receiver 3, you're looking at outside the 30s, right? So, I mean, it's definitely something to consider as a late round, not a late round, but like a mid-round flyer, depending on the way the draft goes. It sounds crazy because Juju was being ranked as a top 10, top 15 receiver last year. But there's the Deontay Johnson effect, okay, which is what we have to look at. Deontay Johnson was more of the Antonio Brown role, okay? Antonio Brown role. A rookie season, listen, 88, 9, 23, and 7. Had 144 targets, which was number 1 on the team. Number 1. So I think we really need to look at that and see who was getting the ball most of the time. And I think Deontay Johnson allows them the opportunity to move around the field a lot more than Juju Smith-Schuster. And then you have Chase Claypool, who comes in with a 62, 873, and 9 first season. Okay. And again, you hear the name, and no matter what, everybody's going to be compared to somebody, right? No matter what, everybody's going to be compared to somebody. And obviously, when you look at Chase Claypool, it reminds you of a guy named Hines Ward, right? It just reminds you of guys like Hines Ward, because Hines Ward was a tough kind of receiver that ran across the middle, that went deep, that did the out routes, that was always there to be able to catch the ball and to make yards after the catch based on guys basically bouncing off of him, right? So we look at that and we say, okay, Chase Claypool, Deontay Johnson, Juju Smith-Schuster. I mean, they have a very talented receiving corps, along with the rookie Naje Harris. So the outlook, okay, Chase Claypool honestly finished as their best receiver, and a lot of that was touchdown dependent. Okay, we all know in week 5, 7, 115, and 3, he exploded against the Titans. Now, he hit a rookie wall every now and then because that's what rookies do. So those numbers could be inflated a little bit because of the touchdown factor, which I tell you all the time is a premium number. I cannot project touchdowns. They can change so drastically from year to year. So we have to look at that respectively. But Chase Claypool finished as the number 14 receiver. But to put things in perspective, at 9.7 fantasy points per game in a standard league, which goes up to about 13 or 14 in a PPR league, right? So he gave you that kind of production. Will he do it again? Again, this all rides on the offensive system, and this all rides on the arms of Ben Roethlisberger. I think the misconception of this team, okay, I think the misconception of this team is going to be that they are going to be kind of like the Atlanta Falcons, where they're just going to throw the ball. Matt Ryan again, 615, 620, 630 times. And, it's just going to be like the Rams, where they're throwing the ball all over the place. This style of offense is going to change for the Pittsburgh Steelers. People have to understand that. So you have to temper those expectations. Adam checks in and says, you think Claypool is going to be on the upward trend this year? I mean, you know what, Adam? Depending on where he's drafted, right? Right now he's being drafted as between 35 and 45, in an ATP of about the 6th to 7th round in a 12-man league, right? So it all depends, honestly, who you're going to take ahead of him, right? Or who's going to be behind him. I mean, that's the biggest thing. So right now, if you look at where Chase Claypool is, I'll just give you an idea. And this is an overall outlook of all the major sites put together of my own projections. But you're talking about guys like below Chase Claypool, like T.Y. Hilton, Mike Williams, Mecole Hardman, Curtis Samuel, okay, Corey Davis, which obviously I would draft Chase Claypool ahead of all of them. And then you look at who's being drafted above Chase Claypool, guys like Jerry Jeudy, Hollywood Brown, Robbie Anderson, which I would draft Claypool over Robbie Anderson. So I think what's going to have to happen is we're going to have to see how the preseason kind of plays out. I don't put a lot of stock in the preseason, but just to see how he's being used. And I honestly think that he could be, that wide receiver. I think this team, honestly, could go Deontay Johnson, wide receiver 1, Chase Claypool, wide receiver 2, and Juju, wide receiver 3. right? I could definitely see Juju dropping the most out of all these guys. So I think that, honestly, last year it was probably Juju, Johnson, and Claypool. So in that perspective, in the preseason before everything unraveled, I think we could go up again, man. I think we could go up. Bobby Duh, hello, Jigsaw. Win Daily member here, but fairly new to DFS. Looking forward to playing fantasy football for the first time. As a new player, what would you say is the most important for me to focus on in DFS? Bobby, first of all, as always, my man, thank you for joining in. I really appreciate it. I love when members check in through Discord, get in there, and the Win Daily community is so righteous. It really is. There's so many brilliant minds within this community. What I would say, honestly, when we're talking about DFS, I'm going to give you my motto that I tell everybody. Consistency is key. When you play DFS, consistency is key. You have to avoid the zeros at all costs. And what I mean by that is you have to look at your team that you're putting in for your DFS lineup, and you have to go in and say, what guy's going to hurt me the most? What guy's going to help me the most? And then you have to figure out in between what guys are going to be able to give you positive point production. So, Bobby, that means, in my opinion, you're always going to have your big dogs, right? You're always going to have your Vlad Guerreros. You're always going to have those guys at the top. You know what? Listen, yesterday was Brandon Lowe for Tampa Bay, right? So you're always going to have your big dogs at the top. Max Muncy, right? But what happens when Max Muncy, who's a pure power hitter, or Vlad Guerrero is a pure power hitter, who gives you a zero? Right? You need to fill the rest of the role with guys that are in the positive, that are consistent. May not be double point guys, but guys are to give you that 6 to 8 to 7. So if you have 3 guys that each give you 7, that's 21 points. And Vlad Guerrero gives you a 4 when you're expecting a 20. You just made up 17 points with those other 3 guys. Now, if you take all power guys and they're all zeros, you have nowhere to pick up that slack. So you're automatically going to lose. So that's why consistency for me is key. In NFL, it's going to be the same way. In NFL, you need consistency. You're going to have your 1-2 punches, right? You're going to have your top wide receivers. You're going to have your top running backs, your top quarterbacks. But when you're taking, after you take, listen, you throw Josh Allen in there, hypothetically, right? All right, put Josh Allen in there. He's in there. He's your placeholder as your quarterback. And then after that, what do you do? Right? What do you do? Make sure you have some positive point production. Make sure you have consistency. Listen, matchups are huge. I understand that. But also make sure within those matchups that you take consistent guys within those matchups to help you formulate your entire lineup. That is the most important key I can tell you. Get consistency. Get consistency. Don't go a guy that goes up and down. I stay away from. I really do. Okay. Unless the value drops considerably. I'll give you an example before we move on. Nick Castellanos yesterday, $4,200 in baseball for the Cincinnati Reds. The matchup was there, right? The matchup was there. Nick Castellanos was a $5,500 value just 3 weeks ago. He started to heat up. I look at his numbers. He's going 4, 7, 4, 5. He's starting to hit up. He's starting to hit the ball. I bank it on $4,200. I take a guy because he's down $1,700 from what his actual value truly is. And what's he do? He goes off. But again, if he doesn't go off, he doesn't hurt me because I know he's at least going to give me 5 to 7, which is positive point production, and he only cost me $4,200. So that's what we have to look at when we're setting our DFS lineup. So, Bobby, all I will say is the number one word is consistency is key. That's what I will tell you. For me, everybody sets their lineups differently. Everybody. And you're going to learn that, which is great. From the Win Daily team, everybody, whether it be Two Locks, whether it be Stoby, it doesn't matter. Whether it be Jason, whether it be Nick, we all do different things. See it. Everybody does a different kind of formulation. For me, my main word is consistency. So again, check that out, consistency, and you're at least going to get points. I'll tell you that. So if you get the right guys who are ultimately consistent and you keep that core with a couple guys that are bombers at the top or huge touchdown guys at the top, you're going to cash every week. Trust me, you're going to cash every week. You have to be consistent. Stay consistent. That is the key. So when we talk about, we broke down the Pittsburgh Steelers. Okay, we worked out, but here's the thing. I think we looked at it from an entire fantasy perspective. We covered a lot, but I want to talk about my man Stefon Diggs. And I know a lot of people are not going to agree with this. A lot of people are not going to agree with this. I get it. But Stefon Diggs obviously had an unbelievable year last year. Okay. The best wide receiver in fantasy football. Okay. He did. All right. His numbers were absolutely mind-boggling. Did anybody expect him to get 166 targets? Did anybody expect him to have close to 1,600 yards? Nobody. Nobody. Except, guess what? Me. Now, I don't toot my own horn a lot, but what I will say is guys give me the ability to project. Their information gives me the ability to project. And I have feelings every now and then when I look at these guys and say, okay, I can see how this is starting to develop. Now, again, I'm going to be fully honest with you. I had a lot of insight. Okay. I had a lot of insight when it comes to Stefon Diggs. Okay. So a lot of people don't know this, but if you follow me at Cutillo23 and you follow my own sports network, not fantasy network, my actual sports network, which is Heat Ratio Sports. Check us out. Go give us a follow at Heat Ratio Sports, where we do all different sports talk. Okay, just from a perspective, we have guests on all the time. We bring different reporters on, different teams. I mean, obviously it's Philly centric, but we cover from a national perspective as well. And I'm lucky to be very friendly with one of the Buffalo Bills beat reporters, which is Alexa Ross from Rochester, New York. And me and her had multiple conversations of breaking down game film and understanding where, number one, this offensive line was, where this coaching staff was, and where Josh Allen's progress was as a player, coming into his own. And she was all in on the Stefon Diggs train, okay? She was all in on the offensive side of the ball when it comes to fixing the mechanics of Josh Allen. She was all in. She said that offensive line was unbelievable. So when I broke all that down and I looked at what happened in Minnesota and said, I still know this kid can be king in Stefon Diggs. He's still only 26 years old. He's in his prime, right? So when you have a young quarterback who locks in on one of those guys, okay, who not necessarily is a veteran, but's been in the league for a few years, and you hit off with that relationship, which is what she had said as well. I was like, Stefon Diggs is going to be a top 7, top 5 wide receiver. And everybody thought I was crazy. Well, it actually came to fruition because he was a top receiver in fantasy football last year, okay? He was unbelievable. 330 points from a fantasy PPR perspective, almost 21 points per game per week. That's huge. That's huge. You stuck him in your lineup, set it and forget it, right? Excuse me. And you want those kind of guys. He never gave you a single-digit game, ever. Stefon Diggs never gave you a single-digit game. There was 2 games where he dipped below, and he had 10.8 and 10.9. Just call them 11. Every other game was above 14 to 15 points, most of them in the 20s. So Stefon Diggs was the man last year. He was the man. And when you look at that and you break this down, you have to say, can he be as good as he was last year? And that's the interesting part. Can he be as good as he was last year? I don't know. I don't know. And I think that's what we need to look at. The thing is, when guys have such unbelievable years like Tom Brady did last year and Aaron Rodgers did, can they come back and do the same thing? And the only reason why I say that is because I know, listen, he is going to be good. He is he is undoubtedly going to be a top wide receiver 1. Okay, but I don't think he's going to be a top 5 guy this year. I don't think he's a top 5 guy this year. Just my opinion. I don't. I think he slides out of that 5 and he drops to like 7 or 8. Now, that's not terrible, but the problem is people are going to be drafting him as number 1 or number 2 or maybe number 3. And that's where I mean the Stefon Diggs slide. You bring a guy in like an Emmanuel Sanders, who's a really good veteran receiver who I think suits this offense a lot better than John Brown did last year, who was off injured. And listen, he has explosiveness, but I don't think he fit as well as a guy like Emmanuel Sanders, who's a really good blocker and a really good route runner, which is going to help Josh Allen. You have the rise of Gabriel Davis, who I was really in on last year, who I think is a stud this year that you can get in the later rounds. I do. I think he's going to be a really good wide receiver. We don't know what's going on with the Cole Beasley thing because of COVID, right? And his, outspokenness and, in his vaccination status, that's not neither here nor there. We have to look into that. They also have a Azakim kind of guy, in Isaiah McKenzie, who Isaiah McKenzie is one of those guys. He's not like a trick wide receiver, but he's a guy that comes in and does so many different things and gets the defense on their toes. So there's going to be a lot different style of route running this year on this team. And I think a lot of this goes back to Zach Moss, who looks really good in this offense, who I think is undoubtedly going to be the lead back. He's already looked good in training camp. You already see he's come and he's mastered the playbook. He understands how the game works now in his second year. And I think that they're going to rely on running a little more. Okay, so if you're going to rely on running a little more, those 166 targets, I think maybe drop to 140. And 26 target, a minus 26 target drop is the difference between finishing top 3 in wide receivers to maybe top 8. And that's all I'm saying. I'm not talking about a huge slide, but I'm talking about a slide of where people think he's going to go and finish, right? That's what I'm speaking of consistently. I think that's one of the things you really have to look at. Adam says Josh Allen got paid this year is going to be a big. Josh Allen is my 100% my number one fantasy quarterback this year, above Patrick Mahomes. And that brings us to this question, okay? Do you go with a top overall pick as a quarterback? Now, I think this is a really interesting question because I seen a couple drafts where Patrick Mahomes went number 1 overall, and I was shocked. Like, and again, I am one of those guys. I could be honest with you. I'm one of the guys where I could say, listen, I've drafted quarterbacks with my number 1 pick before. I've drafted them as my number 1 pick before. So, listen, I am not discounting the fact that it can be done. Now, should it be done this year? I don't know. Okay, I think there's a lot more opportunity with that number 1 pick this year, in a running back and a wide receiver status, because I think the quarterback market is really good. I think there's 12 to 13 solid arms, okay, that you can build around, whether it be DFS or season long. I do. So I think that's one of the most important things to look at, okay? Because if I take Patrick Mahomes overall and I'm in a 10-man league and I'm staking back to 19 and 20 or 2021, who's going to be that guy? Who's going to be my RB1? Right? And that's the thing you always have to look at. Is your RB1 now going to be Naje Harris? Right? If you take a number 1 pick, I mean, let's just look at that. Is it going to be Chris Carson? Is it going to be DeAndre Swift? I mean, these are the kind of guys you're looking at as your RB1, right? So that's what you have to look at. If I take Patrick Mahomes, number 1 overall, and I come back and take, and I'm talking about not going zero running back theory, okay, and I take a guy like DeAndre Swift, are you happy with Mahomes and Swift? And then say you double up and you take Myles Gaskin. Okay, you happy with that? Or do you take your number 1 overall pick, in my opinion, Dalvin Cook, and then you come back and you look, okay, I can come back in the quarterback market if I'm so insistent on taking a quarterback, okay, and I can get a guy, honestly, like Matt Stafford, right? Like Ryan Tannehill, guys that I think are going to be very, very good. Okay, and then I could draft a wide receiver at 21 and probably get a guy like a Robert Woods or an Allen Robinson. So you could start off. I mean, it depends. What would you rather start off with? A 1, 2, 3 punch of a Matthew Stafford, Robert Woods, and Dalvin Cook? Or would you rather go Patrick Mahomes, Naje Harris, and then get a guy, towards the end, in a receiver market, like maybe a CeeDee Lamb? Or do you take a guy like a double running back of Myles Gaskin. So it's all going to depend on what you want on your team. That's what it's going to depend on, right? Adam says I usually pick quarterback or running back for my first pick, or maybe wide receivers. It all depends on what route and what scoring system you're in and how you want to build your team. Now, if you're in a 4-point per touchdown league season long for for running backs, I can't justify taking a run. For quarterbacks, I can't justify taking a quarterback as my number one pick. I just can't do it because I need the 6 points per touchdown. I need the 5 points for 100 yards, right? So, if you're taking a 4-point per touchdown league for your quarterback and a 4-point per 100 yards passing, that's only 8 points. That's not enough for me to take him as my number one overall pick. But if your scoring system adjusts and it says, okay, we're going to give 5 for every 100 and we're going to give 6 per touchdown, that's 11 points for 100 yards of a touchdown. If you times that by 3, that's 33. Okay, now we're talking. Now we're saying, okay, we can justify that number one pick status. So it all depends. It all depends on where you're at. It all depends on what your scoring system is. And it all depends on who you want your 1, 2, 3 punch to be. Okay, because if you're number one, you're coming back at 20 and 21. So you have to talk about where do you want to be? Who would you rather have? Right? So I think it's a really good topic. We're going to talk about that tonight on Sirius XM on Fantasy Sports Radio, me and Jason. So make sure you tune in 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. Taking phone calls as well. So make sure you call in and ask those questions to get that audience number up. But I don't know if me personally, I wouldn't go top as my top pick with my quarterback. Just wouldn't be me, but everybody is different. That's what makes fantasy so great. Now, the other question I want to talk about before we get out of here is, and I didn't put it on my topic list, but I'm seeing a lot of highlights of Sterling Shepard. Now, Kenny Golladay goes over to the New York Giants. And a lot of people, listen, I like Kenny Golladay. I do. And I like Sterling Shepard. I like Sterling Shepard as a guy that, stepped into that role when he was healthy. Okay. But I honestly think, I'm going to be honest with you guys, right? Even though I really like Kenny Golladay and I like what he can do, I think Sterling Shepard to me is an absolute steal in fantasy drafts this year. An absolute steal, in my opinion. Okay. Right now, he's being drafted as anywhere between 60 and 70 from the wide receiver ranks. Okay. An ADP of 13 to 15 of a 12-man league. That's insane to me. That is huge value. We talked about this before. Okay. We talked about this before about taking a chance on guys that may not even suit up or may not even get the lion's share of the snaps on the offensive side of the ball, instead of taking a guy that's already established in an offense that's shown you the ability to give you positive point production. Okay. When he's healthy, Sterling Shepard in 2016 and 2018, 100 plus targets. Okay. When he's healthy, a 13.5 yards per catch. When he's healthy, okay, giving you an average of about 180 to 185 fantasy points per year, which is averaging between 13 and 15 per game. I guarantee you, actually I should say, because I love The Rock, I guarantee that people are going to draft a ton of guys ahead of Sterling Shepard that do not deserve to be drafted. I'm telling you. Right now, I'm looking right now, okay, at Sterling Shepard as being one of the biggest steals of the draft. Honestly, with the way he's being predicted to go, I would take Sterling Shepard. I don't care what anybody says. I take him above Henry Ruggs. I take him above John Brown, Michael Pittman Jr. I take him above Russell Gage. I take him above Nelson Aguilar. These are guys that are being drafted before Sterling Shepard. Sterling Shepard, mark my words. I'm telling you right now, and I know a lot of this has to do with Daniel Jones, but if Daniel Jones can receive protection and Sterling Shepard can stay healthy, and now you have Kenny Golladay commanding attention. If Evan Ingram can actually stay healthy and command attention as well, Sterling Shepard is going to live in the middle of the field. Not Darius Slayton. This is going to be Sterling Shepard. It's going to be his role on this offense as wide receiver 2. And I'm telling you right now, as a wide receiver 2, Okay, Sterling Shepard, hey, you're looking at his overall numbers, 60 plus catches, 800 to 900 yards is not out of the realm of possibility. And if you could take Sterling Shepard in the late rounds of your draft, I'm telling you right now, you are going to be sitting pretty and laughing at all those other owners that passed on him. Okay, so for me, for my money, one of the steals of the draft is going to be Sterling Shepard. Okay, Bobby checking in says, "Big Blue Life, let's fucking go." I love it. But as always, listen, man. Fancy Firebox. We went 41 minutes. This has been great. We broke down, spent a lot of time on the Pittsburgh Steelers, which I think was very, very important. Again, Win Daily Sports. Go subscribe to the YouTube page. Post a comment, automatic. You get the free membership for 30 days, okay? Throw your email address in there. Join the Discord chat, okay? There's a free Discord chat. Download Discord, Win Daily Sports. Go on the website, register. You'll be good. And then as long as you do that, the boss man will up your membership to gold. And if he doesn't do that, let me know, and I'll take care of it myself because the man is busy. So sometimes he forgets. But as always, listen, Fancy Firebox here every Saturday and Sunday. We go long form on NFL on Saturdays. Tonight, Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio, myself with the boss man, Mr. Jason Mraz. He will be hosting. Okay, with myself, we will be co-hosting. I will be co-hosting, which is pretty important to me because I think it's going to be fun. It's going to be electric. We're taking phone calls for 2 straight hours. Listen, what else you got going on a Sunday night? Right? Explain what else you got going on. So Sunday night, 11 p.m., Channel 87, lock it in, Sirius XM. Check us out. 2 straight hours talking everything, giving away memberships, giving away discounts. Okay, we got a ton of stuff to talk about tonight, so bring it all, bring the heat, as always. But as always, Tony Jigsaw Cutillo at TCutillo23, Win Daily Sports, everything. At Fox Sports The Gambler, you can catch me every single day at 3:50. It's at Heat Ratio Sports. You can catch me at least 2 to 3 times a week, and at the Sharp app. Got some new things coming as well. New show to be airing on Fridays, and some Plus Money Action Talk with my man Mark Drumheller and my man DFS Go. So, as always on a Sunday, everybody enjoy the weather, enjoy your family, enjoy life, because never take it for granted, because every day is a blessing. Everybody stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll catch you next week.